December 14, 1944, over the freezing skies of Germany. The B-17 bomber Liberty Bell shuddered violently as flak bursts tore through the thin morning haze. Inside the metallic belly, Sergeant Jack Turner, barely 20 years old, pressed his back against the cold fuselage, his gloved hands gripping the handles of a .50 caliber Browning machine gun. The roar of four Wright Cyclone engines drowned out every thought, but not the fear that lived inside every waist gunner. Outside, the sky was chaos. Black smoke clouds blossomed like poison flowers as anti-aircraft shells exploded all around the formation. The bomber's thin aluminum skin rattled as if it could come apart at any moment. Turner's oxygen mask frosted from his breath. The temperature had dropped to 40°C, and the wind howled through the gun ports like a living thing. Then came the call over the intercom. Bandits, 11 o'clock high. Turner swung the heavy twin Brownings toward the sound. His boots braced against the narrow floor strip of the waist compartment. The open window beside him, no glass, just a gaping hole in the aircraft, sucked the air violently outward. One false move, one careless shift of balance, and he'd be gone tumbling into the endless grey clouds below. But he didn't think about that. Nobody did. Training had drilled it into them. The waist gunners were the ship's shield. They stood in pairs, one on each side, firing through open ports as German fighters screamed in from the rear to keep from falling. Each man wore a steel harness clipped to the aircraft frame. It was uncomfortable. The wind tugged and yanked at them constantly, slamming against their flak vests. Their knees ached from the cold, their fingers numb despite the thick gloves. Turner's eyes narrowed. Through the windscreen, he saw them tiny black crosses growing larger by the second. Messerschmitt Bf-109s, 3 of them, diving fast. "Here they come," someone shouted. The first burst of enemy fire stitched across the bomber's wing. Turner squeezed the triggers, and the twin Brownings erupted to life. The vibration nearly tore the gun from his grip. Shell casings clattered around his boots, bouncing and spinning before being sucked out into the rushing air. The smell of hot gunpowder mixed with the metallic sting of the high-altitude cold. Tracer rounds streaked across the sky like fiery comets. He couldn't hear them. Not really. The engines and wind made sure of that, but he felt every vibration through his arms, through his chest. The recoil of those guns was brutal. The Browning M2 fired at 800 rounds per minute, each bullet a half-inch of death, flying at nearly 3,000 feet per second. The German fighter flashed past close enough for Turner to see the pilot's face for an instant. Then it was gone. "Nice shooting, Waist," the tail gunner yelled through the intercom. But there was no time to celebrate. Another 109 was coming in from below, climbing hard. Turner pivoted, his harness biting into his ribs as he leaned into the opening. His boots slipped on a spent shell casing, and for one heart-stopping second, his foot dangled over open sky. His stomach lurched, but the safety line held. He caught his breath, tightened his grip, and fired again. This time, he saw the tracers connect, orange sparks dancing across the enemy's engine cowling. The fighter wobbled, then veered off, smoke trailing behind it. The crew cheered, but the sound was swallowed by the endless wind. Every second up there felt like an hour. They weren't just fighting the enemy, they were fighting the elements. The freezing air, the fear that one wrong move could send them tumbling into nothingness. The waist gunners had no real protection. The waist of the bomber was open to the air to allow freedom of movement for the guns. The slipstream, the air rushing past the fuselage at nearly 400 miles per hour, pulled constantly at their clothes, threatening to rip them from their positions. Even speaking to each other was nearly impossible without the intercom. Still, they fought on. For 8 long minutes, the Liberty Bell battled through the German sky. Turner's shoulders ached from the recoil, and his fingers bled where the cold metal of the gun had frozen his gloves. The sky was filled with crisscrossing lines of tracer fire, red and white streaks cutting through the grey. Somewhere above, another bomber exploded, breaking apart into a cloud of flame and falling debris. Turner didn't look. He couldn't. He focused on the next target, a Focke-Wulf 190 coming in low and fast. He waited until it filled his sight, then pressed the triggers again. The guns chattered, thunder in his hands. The 190 pulled up too late. Its wing caught fire, and it spiraled away into the clouds. When the attack finally ended, The sky fell eerily silent except for the engines. Turner's body trembled not from fear now, but from the cold and exhaustion. Smoke curled from the overheated gun barrels. He leaned against the fuselage, breathing hard through his mask, the taste of cordite sharp on his tongue. The intercom crackled. "All clear. Good shooting, boys. We're heading home." Turner allowed himself a weak grin. Home. That meant England, warm coffee, dry socks, a real bed. But as he looked out over the frozen clouds below, he knew that home was still hours away. Anything could happen before they got there. He unclipped his harness just long enough to stretch, then locked it again. That small steel hook, the only thing between him and a 20,000-foot fall, was his lifeline. He glanced once more at the smoking barrels of his Browning, still hot from the fight. They'd survived another mission barely, and as the bomber limped back toward the English Channel, Sergeant Jack Turner realized something that every waist gunner eventually did. Courage wasn't about not being afraid. It was about holding the line literally while death clawed at your back at 400 miles per hour, and still finding the strength to pull the trigger.